An occupied mind is a tool used by evil to distract us from what truly matters. And without realizing it, we easily get ensnared into this trap when we aspire to attain more in life. But there was a time, long ago, when people were contented with what little they had. In a faraway kingdom, so far that only charlatans and seafarers in search of escape and solitude chance upon, nestled a quaint little village tucked away in the middle of a packed, dense forest. It was so tiny that anyone there knew everyone, so visitors to the place would surely stick out like a sore thumb. But the village had one peculiar trait at that, for it only grew the most enormous of fruits one ever laid his eyes on. Plums the size of watermelons, figs as huge as fists, berries that would easily break your toes if they fell on your foot. Only travelers who were fortunate and trusted enough by its dwellers got to sample its bounties. But despite this abundance, the village was destitute, so destitute that the townspeople lived in ramshackle homes and barely had shoes on their feet. For farming only covered their basic needs, but was not enough for other comforts. And so, in this village lived a humble blacksmith. He was a common blacksmith, someone who ground and pounded iron as their daily regimen. Now, you may be wondering, how would a blacksmith thrive in such poor conditions, let alone feed and raise a family? Let me tell you, since the village was in the middle of nowhere, travelers from afar would purposely seek the blacksmith's services and wares. When soldiers patrolled the area, he would repair their helms, sharpen their swords, and reshape their armor to be as good as new. When ships were stranded ashore, the crew would travel several miles inward requesting the blacksmith to fashion them oars and rafters as they awaited their next voyage. For those who were a bit out of luck, he was also quite adaptable in that he would consider other forms of payment. He would gladly accept fruit, fowl, bread, or barley from locals when he crafted farming tools and horseshoes for their mules. The blacksmith lived a simple life alongside his dear wife and son, and they were happy that way. On one cold autumn morning, when leaves started to fall and daylight was brief, there was a traveling merchant of oils and potions who chanced upon this village. To his detriment, his carriage broke down in the middle of the road. Not a soul in sight was to be found. After being lost for hours in the forest, a path opened up which eventually led him to the blacksmith. The man fabricated a new iron spoke for his carriage, which turned out to be even better than the original. The merchant was very much pleased with the blacksmith's work, and immediately grew a liking to him because of his demeanor. The two became fast friends. The next morning, when the merchant saw the fresh harvest from the village and its hospitable people, he decided to stay for a while as he felt he deserved a break from his trade. When the time came for him to leave, he promised to return soon and gift the village with some of the fine samples from his collection. One day, a proclamation reached the village where the ruling count summoned all artisans and blacksmiths to the town hall the day after. After the blacksmith attended, he learned that the count was looking for someone to fashion him a good sword, which had to be done in 10 days. The count was willing to pay a handsome fee for those who would be chosen. The blacksmith's eyes lit up as he saw this as a way to better provide for his family and village. So for the next 10 days, he labored away at the forge. He gathered one of the most durable metals he could ever find, as it was not like every day a count required his services. Day and night, his furnace blazed and smoldered, and he made certain the iron was properly tempered. He repeatedly hammered, heated, and pounded the steel away into pristine shape, and when he was finally pleased with his work, he made an ornate hilt and adorned it with some gems he kept for a special piece. The end of the 10-day arrived, and the count once again sent for the metalworkers to present their work. Only 3 were selected in the final contest. The first blacksmith brazenly beat his chest.
I have made you 10 swords, my lord, a sword for each day I worked. Not a day was wasted.
The second blacksmith sneered at the statement, bowed, and proudly looked at the Count.
I own a shop, housing a pool of smiths. I have made you 30 swords, which would not only equip you but your guards as well.
Finally, our protagonist, the blacksmith, with his eyes lowered, extended his arms and humbly presented his work, wrapped around a white wool cloth.
Forgive me, but I've only made one, my lord. But it's special. One made from the finest of metals. The best work I can do in 10 days.
The Count glanced at the different sets presented, but seemed unimpressed. The first set looked durable but mediocre, the second was cheap and brittle, and finally the third. It was a longsword. He grabbed it by the hilt and swung it with great vigor. He loved the ringing sound it made in his ear.
This is what I choose. Hurry up and give this man his reward.
The Count ordered his servant, who then produced a large pouch of over 100 silver coins. The blacksmith could not contain his joy, as it was the first time he received a sum like that in his life. And to make it even sweeter, he was also installed as the official swordsmith in the Count's court, where he was only tasked to craft swords, shields, and armor for his entire troop, with full compensation for the years to come. He threw a banquet once he reached home, and the town rejoiced. Life was indeed good for the blacksmith. But everything had its price. Blood, sweat, and tears dripped on the anvil as he toiled and hammered each day for a long while. Several years passed. His hair turned grey and his skin started to wrinkle, until the moment came when at last he was able to equip the last soldier in the Count's troop. It was only a matter of time before his handiwork was tested in battle. In a sudden turn of events, he learned that the first intended targets were the residents of his village. Unknowingly, all this time, the Count was preparing to take hostile control over the abundance of what his village had to offer. Once he knew of this, he begged and pleaded with the Count to spare his family and friends. He even offered his life, but his persistent pleas only fell on deaf ears. The blacksmith didn't believe what was happening and couldn't bear the guilt that the very weapons he created would be used against him and the people he knew all his life. In the spur of the moment, he grabbed a horse and raced towards his village with the hopes of warning them to depart as the soldiers vehemently marched towards it. His valiant efforts proved to be lackluster, as smoke already started to build by the time he reached it. He saw his small house from afar and hurriedly ran towards it, hoping that his family was safe. He was relieved to see them still intact, so he hastily collected what little things he could grab onto as they immediately stormed out of the house. As he stepped out, he was surprised to see a familiar face. His friend, the oil merchant, had returned, unluckily at a bad time. When the first of the soldiers to reach his home was about to throw the first torch, the soldier suddenly froze in his place and dropped to his knees upon seeing his friend. What the blacksmith didn't know was that his dear friend, the traveling oil merchant, all along was the prince in disguise. Upon seeing this, all of the Count's troops and commanders followed suit and knelt in reverence. The prince, not knowing about this decree, was enraged and ordered the troops to stop whatever it was they were commanded to. The blacksmith, together with all of the villagers, were so relieved with what they've witnessed. The flustered prince commanded the immediate arrest of the Count and Countess. He issued a mandate that the Count and all his supporters were to be publicly executed after the spectacle that they'd just displayed, death by the forge. The prince signed a decree in the kingdom, ensuring the protection of the village and its people so that they never would go hungry, always would have shoes to wear, and always have a sturdy roof over their heads. As for the blacksmith, he became a royal adviser to the prince, and never again was ordered to smith a weapon against his will, though he still made some swords and horseshoes when he felt like it.